My childhood neighbor had somehow grown up to become a powerful CEO. During a gathering between our two families, I found myself straddling his lap in his room, toes curled tight. He tilted his head up, tapped somewhere intimate, and murmured, "Don't clench. Focus on me first." I left North City when I was 15. Back then, my parents wanted to expand their business to the coastal regions, so we moved to West City. Next door, on the balcony of the neighboring villa, stood a wild, roguish-looking teenage boy. His parents were always busy, and the grand villa was often left to him alone. He was 2 years older than me, and kids our age were all afraid of David. He had a reputation as the most unruly and brazen kid in the whole villa district. But as his neighbor, I noticed something different. When it came to me, he wasn't as cold. His tone always softened just a little. At the time, I was developing faster than my peers, and because of that, the other boys and girls in the neighborhood often isolated me. Filthy, nasty comments would pierce my ears whenever I passed by. I was quiet by nature, always walking home with my head down, pretending not to care, clutching my backpack straps and enduring all the way until I got home. But when I happened to run into someone familiar, I'd grip my bag tighter, eyes stinging with tears. If they slipped down my cheeks, I'd quickly wipe them away, not wanting anyone to see. David would stand outside his house, holding a basketball, his dark eyes silently watching me, never exposing my fragility. The next day, rumors spread that some of the usual arrogant rich kids in the villa district had been cornered and severely beaten up by someone. No one knew exactly what had happened, but when I heard the news, I was so happy I ate 2 extra bowls of rice that night. That evening, I carefully carried a birthday cake to David's doorstep. The door opened, and in that grand house, only one light was on. A quiet loneliness seemed to stretch throughout the space. It was David's birthday, but his parents were still off working somewhere. He stood in the doorway, subtly blocking my view of the inside. His eye and nose were bruised, wounds that stood out clearly on that handsome face. Uncomfortable, he asked, "What's up?" I looked up, hesitating. "David, brother, Gidge. My mom said today's your birthday, so I tried making a birthday cake. I brought it over." My voice grew softer and softer as I spoke. The boy lowered his gaze and looked at me quietly. He didn't say anything, but his eyes churned with emotion. It was my first time baking, and the cake didn't look very good. I started to feel awkward, thinking maybe I'd overstepped, thinking maybe he wouldn't want such an ugly cake. Just as I was about to take it back, David spoke softly, "Thank you." When he made a wish, the flickering candlelight danced across his striking face. David looked me straight in the eyes and asked, "Next year, will I still get to eat your cake?" His usually cool voice carried a hint of seriousness. I was stunned for a second, then blurted out without thinking, "Of course you can. If you like it, I'll make you one every year on your birthday." He nodded without a word, but his hand, resting at his side, curled into a tight fist where I couldn't see. I never thought we'd be separated so soon. As our luggage was loaded into the car, David stood on his balcony, quietly watching. When our eyes met, I suddenly felt guilty. I hesitated, should I say goodbye? I bit my lip. In the end, I lifted my hand and whispered, so softly it barely made a sound, "David, brother, I'm leaving." His hand rested on the balcony railing. He seemed to hear me. He lifted his eyes, a sarcastic smile playing at his lips. His handsome face was expressionless, voice faint and detached. But his eyes were dark, almost frightening. Goodbye. I thought, if our family hadn't gone bankrupt, maybe I wouldn't have come back to North City. After all, I've always hated the heat, and North City summers were hotter than anywhere else. But my father was swindled by someone he called a friend and lost a huge sum. To fill the financial hole, our company was taken over, and all our properties in West City were sold. Left with no choice, my parents brought me back to North City, hoping to start over again. 7 years had passed. The old villa neighborhood still looked the same. But most of the residents had moved to the newer luxury district. In these past 7 years, everyone's families had grown and expanded. The one that had risen the most, of course, was Lee Corp. Now the top-ranking company in all of North City, a name we once could only look up to before our downfall. Walking past the villa next door, we saw the lights still on upstairs. My mom asked in surprise, "There are still people living next door? I thought the Lees never sold their property here." My dad's eyes lit up. "Later, I'll bring over some specialty goods we brought from West City. If Lee Corp still remembers the friendship between our families, it might make starting over here a lot easier." That night at dinner, my father came home, visibly excited. While washing his hands, he couldn't wait to share. I knocked on their door, and guess what? Someone's really still there. That boy David still lives there. No wonder he's the heir Lee Corp groomed, he continued. Just in his 20s, but the aura that kid has, it's intimidating even for me. My mom looked anxious. "What do you think?" Do we still have a shot at reconnecting with their family? With their status now, I bet there are tons of people trying to cozy up to them. Dad's eyes gleamed with hope. I think we do. I mentioned the idea of staying in touch. David's tone was cool, but he accepted the gift. Mom smiled, unable to hide her joy. That's great. I remember Melina used to cling to that boy when they were little. He never looked anyone in the eye, but he seemed to have a bit of patience for our Melina. Didn't both families joke about arranging a child engagement back then? Dad looked even more excited and turned to me with a serious tone. Exactly. Melina, you should interact with David more these days. That childhood bond probably still counts for something. Later on, try bringing up our situation to him. Hearing I was involved, my whole body froze. David, the neighbor boy from my memories, was now the most talked about golden boy in our social circle. He was brilliant. Even in West City, I'd heard stories about him. As the Crown Prince of Lee Corp., David had grown wilder and more unrestrained than ever. With cold, piercing eyes and a rebellious streak, he was known to loathe anyone who tried to use personal ties to get close. Back then, I left in such a rush. If he didn't hate me for it, I'd already count myself lucky. So how could I possibly dare try to reconnect now? It's been so many years. Childhood bonds, they don't just magically pick up where they left off. I lowered my head, eating quickly, pretending to be invisible. Knowing David hated people trying to leverage relationships, I barely left the house during our first week back in North City. But if we were going to revive our family business, we had to re-establish some connections. So when the social gathering came up, I had no choice but to attend. What I didn't expect was to see David at the gathering. Someone like him, with his aloof nature, shouldn't have even bothered showing up at something like this. Inside the grand hall, those once aloof company presidents had all lowered their postures, huddling around David and speaking to him with smiles that barely concealed their flattery. Even though most of them were far older than him. At the center of the crowd, David stood tall and straight. He tapped his fingers lazily on the tabletop, his posture relaxed and unhurried, his expression faint. There was still that unruly edge in his bones, but now, his features carried an added maturity. All around, people whispered in hushed excitement, "Oh my God, is that David? Why would he show up today? Who has enough face to get David Lee to attend? Unbelievable. It's really young Master Lee. Do you think we'll get a chance to speak to him? Who cares, just seeing him is rare enough. If there's even a chance to connect with Lee Corp., that's a huge win." But even with all that buzz, no one dared to approach casually. David was infamous for his cold nature. Only a few high-ranking executives dared to exchange a few polite words with him. I sat quietly in a corner, trying my best to minimize my presence. I knew this effort might be meaningless. After so many years, David might not even recognize me anymore. So I focused on eating the desserts at the banquet. At least I could enjoy something sweet. Just as that thought crossed my mind, a sharp gaze sliced through the crowd and landed directly on me. I'd long trained myself to stay calm and quiet, but when I met those lazy, dark eyes, my heart skipped a beat. Was David looking at me? Panic surged. I hurriedly lowered my head and pretended not to know him. I tried to comfort myself, maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe he was looking this way for no particular reason. Maybe he hadn't recognized me. Throughout the entire banquet, I kept a deliberate distance from David. Near the end, he left with a calm, unreadable expression. Everyone whispered again, someone must have offended young Master Lee. Even the few executives who spoke to him were drenched in cold sweat. Because David left early, the banquet ended not long after. Once outside the hall, I exhaled a deep breath, slipped off my heels, and walked slowly. Standing for so long had left my ankles red and sore. Under the dim streetlight, a tall figure stopped me in my tracks. It was David. Broad-shouldered, narrow-waisted, and lean, he leaned against his sports car in that signature lazy posture, a cigarette between his fingers, casually flicking a silver lighter in his hand. When he saw me, he calmly extinguished the cigarette, his gaze falling directly onto my bare feet. I had no choice but to stop in front of him. The red nail polish I'd applied out of boredom now made my feet look even paler, but the bold color didn't suit my usual quiet personality at all. Flustered, I quickly slipped my shoes back on. Only then did David finally lift his eyes to meet mine. Our gazes collided. He raised an eyebrow slightly, his voice steady and deep. "It's been a while, Melina." I instinctively straightened up. Damn it, why was I still so afraid of him? I bit my lip, wondering how to break this awkward tension. David gave a soft chuckle, his tone light and teasing. His dark eyes reflected my face as he murmured, "You used to cling to me like crazy. Now you're pretending not to know me." I clenched my palms and answered in a small voice, "David, brother." Okay. That form of address seemed to brighten his mood a little. In his cold, dark eyes, there was a faint glimmer of amusement. Tonight's gathering was meant for me to connect with the rising elites of North City. Because my parents took it seriously, I had dressed up. A tight, off-the-shoulder black gown with a fishtail hem that gave a hint of elegance and allure. My hair was pulled up high, revealing the pale curve of my neck. By all accounts, I should have looked good tonight. Plenty of people at the banquet had stolen glances at me. But this version of me was a far cry from who I used to be. And yet, for some reason, in front of David, I felt oddly self-conscious. His gaze was too intense, almost predatory. Half admiration, half possession. Startled by that look, I quickly dropped my head. David had become so well known in North City that, even though I stayed indoors most days, I couldn't avoid hearing about him. They said the reason Lee Corp had risen to such heights in recent years was all thanks to him. He had overthrown his conservative parents and took over with ruthless efficiency. Decisive. Overbearing. Cold. Merciless. In just 3 short years, Lee Corp had transformed entirely under his hand. Although his parents were still around, the true power behind the corporation now belonged to David. Over the years, countless people had tried to seduce or cozy up to the Lees through David. But not a single one had met a good end. Knowing this, I silently thanked the heavens. That my parents' fawning behavior on our first day back hadn't angered him. David was indeed someone who could help our family rise again. But even with our childhood bond, all I wanted now was to stay far away. Yet, David was still looking at me. When he saw me lower my head, he paused briefly. Something flickered across his eyes, too fast to catch. His Adam's apple bobbed slightly. Then his gaze sharpened, serious to the extreme. When he spoke again, his voice was low but free of desire. Melina. I looked up, startled. His lips curved into a faint smile. His tone was soft, like he was stating a simple fact. You've grown up. Does that mean you can date now? The words were calm, but when I looked into those deep, dark eyes, my face flushed instantly, scarlet red. Oh God. Why am I blushing? So embarrassing. What if he misunderstands? After all, when I was younger, I used to go around declaring I liked him. Panicked, I turned and fled. A full-on, disgraceful escape. As I ran, I deliberately avoided the slightly dim look in David's eyes. Was he disappointed? But I only hesitated for a moment before running again. No way. David Lee, disappointed? He was the coldest, most untouchable young President Lee in all of North City. There's no way he'd be upset over something like that. I must have imagined it. I shook my head. Someone like him? I couldn't afford to provoke. And yet, the more I tried to keep my distance, the more fate seemed determined to push us together. My heart jumped into my throat. What did he mean, long time no see? We literally just saw each other last night. Could he have tattled on me to my dad? Well, to be fair, pretending not to know him and running away was rude. Trying to sound casual, I asked while holding my bowl, David brother, why did he bring me up? What did you say to him, Dad? My father smiled and patted my head. Of course I praised our Melina to the skies. This project, it was your idea from the start. I thought it was worth trying, and now we've caught Lee Corp's interest. That boy from the Lee family said you were impressive. I kept eating, but my lips couldn't help curling up at the corners. If I had a tail, I swear it would have been wagging high in the air. Hee hee. David, who's famously strict with his subordinates, actually said I was capable? But the next thing my dad said almost made me drop my bowl. Grinning ear to ear, he continued, David isn't nearly as scary as people say. He's just got a chilly vibe around him. Since this project started with your idea, Melina, it's only right you gain some hands-on experience. My dad patted my shoulder enthusiastically. I mentioned it to David, and I didn't expect him to be so willing to teach you. Well, there it is, this project, you'll be working directly under David. It's a rare opportunity. No other company in North City gets this kind of treatment. Something in my heart cracked with a dull snap. Who didn't know? In the workplace, David was notorious for being harsh. People had literally cried after being scolded by him. Was I volunteering to get emotionally mauled? But my dad just kept dreaming aloud about Ford Group's bright future. This is it. We're finally on Lee Corp's ship. Now we can rise again in North City. I won't have to go out every day chasing sponsors anymore. I told you, sending David those West City specialties was worth it. That kid must have been touched, which is why he's willing to help us. Melina, you'd better work hard under him. He's powerful now, learn even a little from him, and Ford Group will benefit for years to come. That night, I couldn't sleep. All I could think about was how I had probably offended David, and now I'd have to work directly under him. In North City, who even dared to disrespect David? I regretted it so badly. If only I'd greeted him properly that day, maybe I wouldn't be in this mess now. When I was little, I used to cling to David all the time. I had never seen anyone more handsome than him. I called him Gidge and followed him around endlessly, asking him everything under the sun. Over time, he stopped pushing me away and started tolerating me. But deep down, I knew, I was a bother to him. He didn't like people getting close. Back then, he wasn't yet the strong, composed man he is today. His eyes used to be blank, hiding a silent hostility toward the world. But I didn't understand any of that. I didn't know he was sick inside. I overheard some neighborhood kids calling him crazy dog. Mean, violent, uncontrollable. I cried when I heard it. Because I'd seen the struggle in David's young eyes. How he longed for love but was terrified of it at the same time. And whenever he saw me cry, he would sigh, soft and pained. Those dark eyes would flicker with something unspoken. Then he'd crouch down and gently tell me, "Don't cry for someone like me. I'm not worth it." And he'd carefully wipe away my tears. From then on, I tried everything I could to be kind to him. Until he began to slowly accept the world, and me. But right after I made that promise to stay by his side, I left North City. That year, he stood on the balcony, watching me leave. His eyes turned cold again, just like before. As if saying, "See? Everyone leaves eventually." His gaze had been so dark, so frightening. When he noticed the fear in my own eyes, a flash of regret and panic crossed his face. He wanted to say something. But I was too afraid. I didn't even say goodbye properly. I just left. We could have stayed in touch. But neither of us made the first move. David's pride wouldn't allow him to ask me to stay. And now that I've returned? I'm no longer that 12-year-old girl. I understand so much more than I used to. My family has fallen. While David, he's climbed to a height where everyone else can only look up. 7 years have passed since our childhood bond. And David hates people who try to leverage past relationships. If my family hadn't gone bankrupt, maybe I could have greeted him without hesitation. But now, I don't even have the face to look at him. Any step closer feels like I'm trying to use him. I don't even understand my own awkwardness, my contradictory guilt and shame. I'd behaved so poorly, yet David was still willing to help Ford Group. Did Lee Corp really see potential in such a small project? Or, was David really touched by the gift my dad gave him? I couldn't make sense of it. I tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. Just when my thoughts spiraled out of control, a phone rang, cutting through the silence of the night. An unknown number flashed on the screen. Hello? Who is this? It's me. David. I froze. How did David even get my number? Of course. Lee Corp practically has North City in the palm of its hand. I scowled, completely ignoring the possibility that my dad might have given it to him. Bracing myself, I answered stiffly, David Gidge. What is it? His cool voice came through the speaker. Melina, the first thing you did when you came back to North City, was hide from me. I was stunned. I didn't expect him to say it so directly. I wasn't, I mumbled. On the other end, I could hear the soft click of a lighter. He was lighting a cigarette. Then David spoke again, his voice low, calm, and unwavering. I know this might sound abrupt. But Melina, I don't want to wait around. We're not teenagers anymore. If I hesitate, someone else might beat me to it. Working with Ford Group? That was just my way of making a good impression on you. And agreeing to mentor you? That was selfishness. Heat crawled up my ears. What was David even saying? Was he implying that he liked me? As if reading my mind, he added plainly, don't overthink it. I like you. That's all. I stared wide-eyed, my heart pounding like a drum. Was this how a 25-year-old David confessed? Just, directly? But it was too sudden. All I felt toward him now was guilt. How could there still be room for anything else? Before I realized it, my jumbled thoughts spilled right out of my mouth. There was a pause, and then David replied in a tone that was warm, yet steady. I won't chase you in ways you don't like. I don't need your answer right away either. I just wanted you to know, Melina, don't be afraid of me. No matter what happened in the last 7 years, I'm still the one person in this world who would never hurt you. The night wind carried his voice gently to my ear, anything you need, I'll provide it. Don't hesitate, Melina. Just ask. I listened in silence. My heartbeat pounded so loudly in the still night that it felt deafening. I tried to comfort myself, surely anyone would feel a little moved when someone that outstanding confessed to them, right? On the other end of the phone, David spoke softly, should I come down and see you? I'm right next door. I froze. Our family villas were right beside each other. From my room, I could see directly into David's. I rushed to the balcony and immediately spotted his tall figure standing on his own balcony, so close it felt like I could reach out and touch him. So close, and yet he still called? I hadn't even realized how the gentleness in his voice, the casual familiarity of his tone, had melted away my earlier nervousness. David must have just showered. He wore a nearly sheer robe, loosely tied at the waist. Droplets of water clung to his hair, dripping down his nose, sliding past his Adam's apple, then down his firm, sculpted abs. My eyes widened. Holy hell. David's body was incredible, better than any male lead I'd seen in those adult films. But in weather this cold, was he really not freezing dressed like that? Maybe it was just my imagination, but it felt like the robe at his chest was slipping open even more, as if inviting me to look. I swallowed hard. Rationally, I knew I shouldn't stare. But my eyes were glued to his barely visible muscles like they'd been coated in glue. David let out a low laugh, his voice laced with temptation. Want to come down? I can come over. My useless mouth was about to say yes before my rational brain yanked it back. I bit my lip, forced a smile, and gritted out, and no, better not. It's late. We shouldn't meet now. What if I lose control and touch you? David stared straight at me, as if reading my mind. The next second, his ears flushed red, as if he'd made a huge decision. You can touch me, he said. Go ahead. Touch me. I stared at him, eyes wide in disbelief. Was this really David? David, the same aloof and untouchable David who ruled the city like a king? I gritted my teeth. Even if you let me, I still can't. I'm not someone who lusts after a man's body, and so, I forced myself to refuse. But why did David suddenly look disappointed? Like a puppy abandoned by its owner. Even his usually cool voice carried a trace of pitiful sorrow. Then, if you ever want to see me, just call. For you? I'll come, anytime. Panicking at how fast things were spiraling, I avoided his eyes and blurted, David, get some rest. I'm going to bed. Then I ran back into my room without looking back. I thought I wouldn't be able to sleep after all that. Surprisingly, I slept like a baby. The next morning, the entire Ford group braced itself to welcome David. In reality, it was just the few loyal senior employees who had stayed through the company's downfall, trying to put on their best faces. Ford group couldn't even pay salaries on time anymore. But today, I stood at the front of the line beside my father, dressed in my formal work attire. David entered, backlit by sunlight, leading a group of people behind him. He stood tall and poised, wearing a simple suit that looked nothing short of stunning on him. Nervously, I took a deep breath and stepped forward, reaching out my hand. Welcome, President Lee. Your presence truly honors Ford Group. David paused for a moment, surprise flickering in his eyes. But when he saw the sincerity in mine, his expression shifted into something serious. The air around him changed, a commanding presence washing over me. I quickly masked my nerves and turned, walking beside him as I began to introduce the Ford Group and the project we were hoping to collaborate on. It was my first time handling such a formal business setting, and we were being trailed not just by our own people, but by employees David had brought from Lee Corporation. Everyone at Lee Corp was elite, only top talent could make it there. I dared not make a single mistake. Not just for my own dignity, but because this project might be our company's last hope. The partnership with Lee Corp was Ford Group's only lifeline. But no matter how much I tried, my trembling voice still gave away my nerves. Even so, no one from Lee Corp looked down on me. In fact, they offered thoughtful, professional feedback as I spoke. Perhaps it was because David listened intently the entire time. When the boss respects a project, his team follows suit. When I finished my presentation, David was the first to clap. He looked straight at me, his gaze filled with open praise. Very impressive. Miss Ford exceeded my expectations. I blinked. He called me Miss Ford, not Melina. That formal title, it was his way of showing me respect. Oh, you flatter me, President Lee, I said lightly. But the corners of my mouth were already twitching upward. I couldn't help it. I was the type to wag my tail with pride at the slightest compliment. Seeing my expression, David chuckled. He leaned back slightly in his chair, tapping the desk with his fingers, his tone casual. There's a project in the neighboring city that'll be open for bids later this year. One of the companies eyeing it is the Chen Group. At the mention of the Chen Group, everyone in Ford Group stiffened. Why? Because our downfall was thanks to them. They destroyed Ford Group, and we had no way to fight back. We had no choice but to swallow our anger and hatred. David's gaze landed on me as he stood up. Before everyone, he walked slowly toward me. Miss Ford. Our eyes met, and the intensity of his stare sent heat rushing to my cheeks. President Lee? David's dark eyes curved into a subtle smile. Maybe he didn't even realize how gentle he looked at that moment. Do you want to see the Chen Group fall flat on their face? Or better yet, do you want to lead Ford Group in a glorious comeback? I froze for a second. Then my eyes lit up, and I nearly shouted, yes. Absolutely yes. David smiled and bent slightly so we were eye level. Good. I'll teach you. In that moment, something dropped into my heart, like a pebble into water, sending out endless ripples. I stared blankly at him. David, right now, was so dazzlingly confident, just like the man people whispered about in awe. This must be what real leadership feels like. God help me, his charm was off the charts. Behind me, the employees from Lee Corp were already stunned. They gaped openly, unable to believe this was the same difficult, temperamental boss they knew. No wonder he turned down other invitations just to work with a small company like Ford Group. Until now, none of them could understand why. But now, they got it. The partnership between Ford Group and Lee Corp officially entered its planning stage. And me? David took me straight to Lee Corp to personally teach me how to win that major project in the neighboring city. Because of my arrival, David had his entire office redesigned. The once cold and lifeless space was now filled with warmth and soothing tones. Every senior executive who came in to report couldn't help but sneak glances at me, again and again. They were curious. Who was I, exactly? What kind of woman had the power to make their iron-blooded boss blossom? Ever since I joined Lee Corp, David had never once lost his temper at them in the office. He no longer scowled or told them to redo their proposals from scratch. Now, even if a staff member made a minor mistake, he'd smile and say, "Good job. Thank you for the hard work." But that smile never quite reached his eyes, more like a tiger with hidden fangs beneath a gentle expression. Still, it didn't stop Lee Corp from feeling like springtime under his leadership. Everyone credited me. They were all terrified that I might fall sick one day and not come to work. Truth be told, I was nervous when I first joined Lee Corporation. David was infamous for being harsh and exacting. But to my surprise, he turned out to be incredibly patient and attentive to every single detail in my life. By his side, I didn't have to worry about a thing: food, clothing, even where I lived. He always seemed to know exactly what I liked. David was strong, with a mind and vision that constantly broadened my own. Being around him made me grow. He taught me how to analyze problems, how to solve them. Whenever I felt overwhelmed by setbacks or comparisons, ready to collapse, he was always calm, always there, gently soothing me back to clarity. He didn't just solve problems for me, he taught me how to handle them myself. He was truly guiding me, teaching me how to be a leader, how to run a company. David appreciated my ambition, and he supported me effortlessly. His manners, his values, his vision, everything about him radiated the allure of someone more mature. It felt as if that dark, gloomy David from the past had completely vanished. And I couldn't help falling for this new him. But just like he said, he would chase me in the way I liked, never making me feel pressured. So during my days at Lee Corp, David kept a rational and restrained distance. He was always calm and composed, so much so that I began to lose track. Was this care, or affection? The bidding work was ready. And the closer we got to the opening day, the more reluctant I felt. Once the project was over, would our relationship go back to how it used to be? The more I dreaded the end, the faster time seemed to slip away. I had grown strong, my wings fully formed. The moment our success was announced, all of Ford Group erupted in celebration. My father, beaming with pride, walked up to the Chen Group and clapped heartily. "That's my daughter. That's my daughter." But amidst the chaos, I caught a glimpse of David's face, beaming with pride for me, yet in his eyes, a flicker of sorrow passed. My heart clenched. Was he reluctant too? It felt like everything between us should fall into place perfectly, yet something still felt just slightly out of reach. But I was never the kind to take the first step. Too often, I hesitated, saying, maybe later, only to miss out on what should have been mine. I thought I would be just as cowardly as I was at 15. But then someone unexpected came to find me. She was a well-dressed, elegant middle-aged woman, her skin meticulously maintained. She smiled and reached out her hand. "May I have a word with you? I'm David's mother." I froze. I thought it was going to be one of those dramatic TV scenes, where the powerful Lee family forces the humble Ford daughter to leave their son. But then, before I could react, the woman wiped her tears and suddenly burst into sobs, begging me through tears, "Miss Ford, please, I beg you, don't leave my son. You're the savior of the Lee family." My eyes widened. What? As the last rays of sunlight faded into the sky, I quietly listened to her tell me about the 7 years of darkness David had endured after I left. At 17, he had no one behind him, and still tried to fight for control of the Lee family. At 18, driven by a death-defying determination, he finally caught the attention of the old patriarch. At 19, he was captured and tortured by a rival family for an entire month. He spat out blood and still managed to grin, saying he'd fight to the end for that position. At 20, he officially entered Lee Corp, and climbed the ladder at a shocking speed, even while everyone doubted and suppressed him. At 22, even when his so-called parents could no longer threaten him, he didn't retaliate. He simply held his ground and repaid cruelty with mercy. At 23, he became ruthless and sharp, managing the Lee Corp branches and leading the company onto the international stage. At 24, Lee Corp had firmly secured its place as the leader of North City's business world, but David collapsed from exhaustion and ended up in the hospital. His parents wanted him to rest. But with a high fever and blurry consciousness, he stubbornly shook his head. He said he needed to reach the top, only then could he hold up the bankrupt Ford Group. Only then could Melina see him again. Not leave him behind like she once did. I listened quietly, my heart pounding like it had been struck by a hammer. The woman before me was immaculately dressed, David's biological mother, who had failed in her role for so many years. Now that her son held an unshakable position, she had suddenly discovered motherly love. But how much of those tears were sincere? I couldn't tell. All I knew was that my heart ached so much it was hard to breathe. My David, just 25 years old, had already endured 25 years of hardship. No one saved him. He had crawled out of the dark alone, rescued himself, and was reborn. He had already walked 99 steps toward me. That final step should be mine. As the last glimmer of twilight disappeared, I dialed his number. Static buzzed through the line before a low, hesitant male voice answered. Careful, uncertain. Melina, is that you? Are you calling for me? I held back the sting in my nose, my voice trembling, but every word clear. David, I don't want to call you brother anymore. I want to try to love you. 1 second. 2. 3, and then came his tears, breaking through his silence. There was joy. There was hope. There was the end of suffering and the beginning of everything. We got engaged. The union between Lee Corp and Ford Group sent waves across all of North City. After the engagement ceremony, while the guests were celebrating in the ballroom. In David's private room, I was straddling his lap, my toes curled. His eyes were red, and he was tearfully settling the score from when I had pretended not to know him upon my return. His voice was muffled as he teased me, "Why did you act like you didn't recognize me?" While saying this, his hands were already making their move. My cheeks flushed, a ticklish sensation crawling up my spine. Stop, it's wrong. But his fingers only increased in number. At that point, I could no longer hear what he was saying, only trembled as my nails dug down his back, leaving red lines, one after another. It must have hurt, yet David looked completely pleased. He tilted his head, tapped a certain spot, and murmured, "Don't clench. Answer me first." I shivered again, my grip tightening on him. The night was filled with unspoken desire, our love pouring out through wordless, secret games. When we were teenagers, secret crushes were a coward's most precious treasure. We loved quietly, approached silently, each step carefully measured. But time gives us the greatest gift of all, courage. What was once a hidden crush, had now become a love no longer afraid to be seen. The words, "I love you," a secret buried for 7 years, were finally spoken aloud. That youthful, pure affection, like the summer cicadas announcing themselves with full volume, love never ends abruptly. After all the suffering, joy will come. David's POV. Everyone envied me for being the heir of the Lee family. But my parents' marriage was a business alliance. They each had someone they truly cared about. And I was nothing more than a prop they used to project a loving image to the public. They never loved me. All my childhood memories were of being locked alone in a bathroom, of the disgust on their faces, and the bruises from lessons hidden beneath my clothes. In that massive house, I was always alone. So I learned from them how to hate the world. Back then, I thought, there was no way anyone in this world would ever love me. And so I grew up like that. I was 14. Until Melina appeared. Hair tied in a bun, tiny backpack on her shoulders, earnestly reciting English vocabulary as she walked. She was so well behaved. Fair-skinned, bright-eyed. Whenever she smiled at someone, her eyes would curve like crescent moons. She looked like a gentle kitten, radiating warmth and kindness. She was the little girl from the new family that had just moved into the villa next door. They were noisy, so noisy, I couldn't help but strain to catch what they were saying. Their house was also bright. So bright that even with my curtains fully drawn, their warm lights still filtered into my dim room. That place must have felt so warm. I never thought she'd approach me on her own. After all, I didn't have a great reputation. Everyone said I was a ticking time bomb, liable to explode like a madman at any moment. When the gate rang, she stood timidly at the door, eyes wide, and invited me over for dinner. Dinner? At that warm, glowing home? I looked around at my own cold and shadowed room. And before I could react, a soft, warm hand had grasped my fingers. I looked down. An unfamiliar feeling stirred quietly in my chest. She was so bold. Clearly scared, yet still tilting her head up, eyes shining with sincerity. "David," she said. "Mom said you're all alone tonight, and it's already dark. She's afraid you might get scared in such a big house by yourself. So, she told me to invite you to come eat with us. Is that okay? If you come over, you won't be scared anymore." Her words made me sneer a little. Scared? Me? I've always been alone, what is there to be afraid of? I should have refused. I knew I should have. But my eyes, almost involuntarily, fell to the hand wrapped around mine. And before I knew it, I nodded. That was the first time anyone had held my hand. Her name was Melina. She was sincere. Her parents ran a small company. And the moment they saw me, I could already read the ambition in their eyes. I raised an eyebrow. My gaze dimmed. Living in this kind of neighborhood, I'd long been familiar with those eager to curry favor with my parents. And most of them would start by trying to get close to me, the so-called young master of the Lee family. So this family was the same? But they were wrong. My parents didn't love me. They were flattering the wrong person. I couldn't help them. I had nothing to offer them. I told myself I should leave, politely excuse myself. But Melina's small, warm hand was so real in mine. The warmth from her fingertips spreading all the way to my chest. She really cared. She was truly worried that I might be scared all alone. Maybe it was that warmth I couldn't let go of. Or maybe it was her beautiful smile that dazed me. I lied, shamelessly. Said I was pampered at Lee Corporation, pretended I had pull with the family I resented so much. When her parents gave me those probing looks, I lowered my gaze and just looked at sweet Melina beside me. Then clenched my palm and said, my parents are just busy with work all the time. That's why I stay in the villa alone so often. I let them assume that if I just said a few words to President and Mrs. Lee, they might help the Ford Group climb higher. From that day on, her parents silently permitted her to grow close to me. After all, what parent would willingly let their daughter befriend a mentally disturbed, emotionally unstable boy? Unless they saw a benefit in return? They wanted help from Lee Corporation. And I wanted Melina to stay close. At first, I thought it was just a fleeting interest. But I never expected her to stay by my side for 3 years. I learned all her preferences. What she loved, what she hated. Her habits, her moods, I knew them all like the back of my hand. And then, a dangerous thought crept into my heart. I wanted to make her mine. I thought, if she was under my watch, no one would dare bully her again. But how could someone like me, a neglected, broken thing, deserve someone like Melina? She once said I looked scary when I didn't smile, so I practiced how to smile. She said my voice was cold, so I softened it every time I spoke to her. I never dared hope for anything more. Just treasured those fleeting moments when she still chose to be near me. Until one day, one unforgettable day. It was my birthday. The one even I had forgotten. The kind no one ever remembered. I'd just punished the boys who bullied her, and was back in my room quietly treating my wounds. Pain meant little to me. What mattered was cleaning up fast. So Melina wouldn't cry when she saw me hurt. That's when she showed up. Cradling a freshly made cake with both hands, her cheeks dusted with flour, but her eyes, sparkling like stars. I froze. David, she said excitedly. Quick. Close your eyes and make a wish. You have to be sincere, if you are, heaven will hear you. My fingers trembled. If I was sincere, would heaven really listen? I didn't dare wish for too much. I was afraid even God couldn't hear me. So I made a simple wish. I looked at her and said, next year, will I get to eat your cake again? The candlelight flickered. I glanced at her again and again, wanting to memorize her face. Of course, she beamed. If David wants cake, I'll make it for you. That day, I was so sincere. But I didn't close my eyes. So heaven didn't hear my wish. The goodbye came too fast. I wasn't ready to let Melina go. But lies will always fall apart. 3 years. The Ford Group got nothing from Lee Corporation. My parents never once came to see me. I was just discarded. Cooking alone. Living alone. Spending holidays